My wife has started to act strange. It all started with a damn single hair. My wife is on the shorter side. I can see over her head even if she stands on her toes. We were cooking when she tried to squeeze by. By chance, I looked down at the top of her head. First, I didn't see it. It was hardly noticeable. A single short white hair was mixed inside the rest of the dark strands. I reached out to brush some hair away to get a better look. She flinched away from my hand but laughed at the movement. "You're going gray," I commented, smiling, hoping I didn't offend her. She wasn't even 30 yet, but I've seen people whose hair that turned before her. "Good, I'll look super hot." She laughed again. She let me look at the small white spot. It was short with a slight bend, and thicker than a normal hair. I reached over to take it between two fingers, ready to pull it out. She elbowed my chest, getting away with her first gray hair intact. "Let it grow longer. I like it." I raised my hands, showing a truce. If she wanted to let it grow, I didn't care either way. It was just a hair. We got busy cooking dinner, and I forgot about it for a few days. That was until Carrie fainted at work. The call came while I was in the office. It was an hour before I got the message. I quickly told my boss I needed to leave for the day. I rushed to the hospital with dread forming in my stomach. I met her in the waiting room. She looked pale, but overall not as bad as I feared. Her coworker drove her there, which was nice of them. Soon we were able to see a doctor for a checkup. They didn't see anything wrong with a basic checkup and tests. A scan had been suggested, but it would take a while before Carrie could get a more thorough look. We were sent home without any answers. I tucked her into bed to let her rest for the rest of the day. Thankfully, Carrie didn't feel lightheaded when we got back home, only overtired. I thought getting extra sleep would fix that. The next day, it appeared the rest cured whatever caused the sudden fainting spell. Carrie acted like her old self and went back to work, even though she could have taken another day off. I told her to not push herself. If she started feeling off again, she should stop working and get someone to help. She assured me she felt fine and nothing bad would happen. I believed that for a while. The medical tests wouldn't be for a few weeks. I kept an eye out for more gray hairs at the roots, however none showed. However, I noticed something else. Carrie started to act differently. The signs were small. She would pause for an extra few seconds, trying to think of the next word she wanted to say. I figured she was just having issues sleeping. The concern came when her eating habits changed. Carrie had always been a picky eater. That was fine. We worked around that. One night, I came home to see the food I had bought for myself gone. I wasn't upset, just confused. It wasn't like her to devour frozen meals, and yet she had doubled what she ate without gaining weight. Instead, it looked like she had been losing some. I brought it up to her, and she just brushed it off, commenting she always ate more when the weather got colder. We had been married for 5 years. How did I never notice that before? Then her memory issues got worse. Small items like keys and her wallet were always getting misplaced. I was very understanding and helped her find what she lost every time. After we located what she had misplaced, she told me that maybe stress from work was getting to her. I believed that the first 3 times. I started to look online to see if there was anything I could find that explained these little changes. A month after it all started, she did something she never had before. She snapped at me. We were in the kitchen dishing out a special takeout meal when I caressed the top of her head. I leaned down to kiss the top of hers when she spun around, face red with rage. She pushed as hard as she could with both hands, knocking me hard into the table. It didn't hurt that much. I was more shocked than anything. "Don't fucking touch me without any warning," she shouted and stomped a foot. My mouth hung open. Carrie never swore. Well, rarely. She would drop a curse whenever it was funny. But I had never heard her swear in rage at anyone, let alone imagine she would do so at me. "Sweetheart, are you all right?" I asked, mouth open. What had I done wrong? Did I cause this? Or did something else happen that made her act this way? My head swam with thousands of questions. Carrie quickly settled down, embarrassed by the outburst. She walked over and offered an apology hug that I took. "I'm fine. I don't know. I'm sorry. I just don't feel like myself for some reason," she said in a small voice. I risked a heavy question that changed the mood. Do you think you might be pregnant? We've been trying for a while and hormones can make you act different, I suggested. She scrunched up her face at the suggestion as a joke. Different? As in crazy, she half-joked. Well, I trailed off and my answer made her smile again. Sadly, she pulled away and shook her head. No, I've already checked. I didn't let the disappointment show on my face. We hadn't had the money for the tests to see why we hadn't been able to have a child yet. We figured one would come at the right time. That time simply hadn't come yet. We'll call the doctors to see if you can get in for those scans sooner. You might have hit your head harder than we thought when you fainted at work. It's not as if you made changes to your medications or anything like that, I suggested. There hadn't been a bruise when she fainted, but I didn't want to take the risk. An odd expression came over her face as she chewed on the inside of her lip. Carrie had something she wanted to tell me but was too embarrassed to do so. It took a few minutes and some joking threats of eating her dinner for her to open up. I took some of these Asian pills I bought from the gas station. They're supposed to help with a lot of things, like those weird energy drinks you can find. I frowned concerned over this new information. Do you have the box still? We can look up to see if anyone else has had the same issues. She shook her head and sighed. No, it was like 2 months ago, if not longer. I took 3 and then tossed them out because they made me feel lightheaded. I don't know what they were called, and the gas station stopped selling them. Well, that sucked. She didn't remember enough to track down these mystery pills. At least we had something to bring up when we saw the doctors next. Or so I assumed. I held her tight, assuring her everything was all right. Figuring out why she felt so odd lately wouldn't be a big deal. That it would just take time. I was unaware time is what we lacked. A few days later, Carrie skipped work and stayed in bed. I offered to stay home, but she talked me into going to work. However, I left my shift early to find her in the same spot I had left her. Dark bags were under her eyes even though she rested all day. I got her dinner and begged Carrie to go to the hospital. Somehow, she talked me down and promised to go in the morning if she still felt tired. The meal woke her up a little. I climbed into bed next to her and we watched a bit of TV before both falling asleep. That night, I woke up in the dark to hear her moving in her sleep. I turned on the bedside light and she flinched away from it. Her hands went over her eyes as if the brightness hurt. Do you have a headache? Can I get you something? I offered. Migraine. Yes, please. Feels like pressure. Her voice was low and weak. I got up and put my cell phone in my pajama pants pocket. Depending on the next few minutes, I would call for an ambulance. I got her a glass of water and some aspirin I helped her take. Her body felt far too thin. How had she lost so much weight without anyone noticing? While keeping her upright with a hand on her back, I spotted that single white hair growing out of the top of her head. I had forgotten about it. An urge to pluck it came over me. While Carrie remained defenseless, I took the hair between a finger and my thumb, then pulled. Her body jolted. Instead of normal hair, it appeared like I had started to pull out a thread that started to get thicker. Her scalp bulged a little from what was under the skin, making my stomach churn. Unable to help myself, I kept pulling. Slowly but surely, the long white thread came out, growing thick and thicker as more came into view. Her body twitched and her eyes rolled back. I knew this was hurting her, and yet I couldn't stop. Wrapping the exposed thread around my hand a few times, I took a good hold of it with the other and pulled as hard as I could. White liquid pooled out from around the wound. I heard a soft pop as the end of the white wriggling mass came loose. It moved on its own, the end as thick as my finger. I could have sworn I heard it scream in the dim light of the room. Carrie had stopped moving. Her body limp, but somehow a dazed smile was on her face. Oh, that's better. Her words were slurred and her eyes slowly started to shut. Disgusted by what I saw, I tossed the thing away as quickly as I was able. My hands flew to her shoulders, trying to shake her awake. I didn't understand what happened or what I just did. The wriggling long white creature I just pulled from her head started to inch closer to my bare feet. I nearly threw up, my skin crawling at the sight. I might have been able to handle myself if what happened stopped there. Quickly, my deepest fears came to light as more small white hairs pushed through Carrie's dark strands. moving on their own looking for a new host. Just one of these things was enough to nearly make me lose it. Seeing so many caused my brain to shut down. I hate myself for what I did next. I turned on my heels, fleeing the house, leaving my wife behind. I know I called 911 but had no memory of what I said. Police and an ambulance showed up. A lot of questions I did not have answers for were asked. I sat in the back of a police car, letting people speak to me but not hearing a word. At some point, another car pulled up. A black one with a very plainly dressed man got out. He took some officers aside and spoke with them. Had someone called a lawyer for me? Did I need one? I didn't care enough to ask. The officers came back and asked if I could speak with them at the station. I numbly agreed but asked about Carrie. They said nothing and just ushered me away. I spent the night at the station going over what I had seen in detail with someone who didn't bother to write anything down. In the morning, I was free to go, but not a soul had told me about Carrie. When I asked, the officer gave a strained look and asked who that might be. I felt like I was going crazy. I demanded information about my wife and caused so much trouble they almost locked me up. A bomb was dropped on my world. They claimed I was never married, and I arrived that night because of a random arson attack on my home. These officers were bad actors. I knew they were lying, but they refused to drop the new story. I called in a favor and a coworker drove me to my place. The street was swarmed with firefighters finishing putting out a blaze. I stared in sheer shock, realizing they kept me at the station all night so they could cover all this up. Who was they? I don't have the slightest clue. No matter who I spoke to, those people had reached them first. In stressed tones, they claimed to not know who Carrie was. This couldn't be happening. I didn't understand how things went wrong so fast. I called and called, praying someone, anyone picked up the phone that knew her. Soon, my calls and any attempts at contacting her family were blocked except by one person. Her mother answered the phone. First, she didn't speak, and I didn't think anyone was on the other end of the line. Was someone else there with her? Or did she just not want to speak with me? Please stop trying to contact us. We don't know who you're talking about, she said in a low, strained voice. I still have photos of her on my phone. Photos of us together. Please, tell me what's going on, I begged. She was also a victim here. I didn't want to get angry at her. I just wanted answers. That's AI is getting good nowadays, she said, but didn't sound sure of her statement. Please, I loved her as much as you did. At first I thought the line went dead. After a full minute, she responded, whispering so low I barely heard her. I did love her, so much, but I need to think of my family. I lost a daughter. I refuse to let them take anyone else. She swiftly hung up the phone and then blocked my number. I knew I would never hear from her again, no matter how hard I tried. If I did press the matter, I endangered everyone Carrie ever cared about. Right now, I'm staying in a hotel using the last of my savings. My family has offered to take me in, to get help, to try and live a normal life. I considered taking them up on the offer. The only thing stopping me is a constant itch at the top of my head, growing more intense by the hour. A soiled diary found in an attic. These are the pages from a diary written in the back of a maths workbook. The previous owner had retrieved it from their mother's possessions upon her death, where they entrusted it to me. It is unsure if the mother was the writer of this diary, as no name is mentioned and the cover has long been lost to time. This would become the first in my now extensive archive. 5.08. 1991, they left me. Becca, Andrew, and Sarah all fucking left me here. They've left basically everything here, including me, and driven off while I was having a pee in the bushes. I had to go far away because I didn't want them to hear me. I've been sitting here for 6 hours and I'm not sure they're coming back. Just because they turned 16 before me doesn't mean they can treat me like this. It's not even funny. They're supposed to be my friends. What do I do if they don't come back tonight? Camp? On my own? Like building the tent and everything? God, they had better come back. I'm still just in shock that they could do this to me. It's so mean and unfair, and they're supposed to be my friends. Weirdest part is I don't even remember hearing Andrew's noisy car driving off. God, he really needs to get a better car. It's getting late right now, so I have to figure out where I'm gonna sleep tonight because I'm guessing they are gonna leave me for the night just to mess with me. 6.08. 1991 last night was awful. I didn't sleep. It was cold, it was wet. I slept on the ground with all the bugs and dirt just because the stupid tent is so complicated. I heard a dreadful scream too, and I know it's probably foxes, but it's still so creepy. Also, how do people in movies just make fire like that? I used all the matches and still couldn't light the pile of sticks I made at all. I found the sparky stick with the metal part, but I don't know what to do with it. I bashed the two together for a solid hour and only got a couple of stray sparks. I'm now currently wearing all the jumpers I caught with me underneath my coat. I ate some of the jerky and crisps we had, but I'm gonna need to get into the canned food and I don't even know how to open it, so that will be a problem when I come to it. I don't need to worry about things that aren't affecting me for now. When the hell are they going to pick me up? This is so mean of them. I don't know how long they think they can keep this going, but Mum knows I left with all of them. I'll be missed if they don't pick me up, and they will be in so much trouble. I'm going to try to make fire again. July 8th, 1991, the dear woman visited me last night. She was really nice and helped teach me a few things. I was pretty scared when I saw her, but then she was really nice and her voice was so calm I didn't even notice she was completely naked. When I saw dear woman, I realized just how pretty she is, no shampoo, no conditioner, not even a hint of hairspray, and her hair was perfect, like Julia Roberts. She wanted me to call her dear woman. Even when I asked her for her name, she just kept saying dear woman, but I think Julie fits her so much better. She was so smart though. She knew all about starting fires, finding berries, and she was so good at showing me how the tent happens. She even taught me how to wash my hair out here in the woods like she does. I'm gonna look so good when I'm back. Becca is going to have a fit. The only thing she didn't know much about was how to open the cans. I will probably tackle that problem myself later today. When Julie dear woman left, she told me I shouldn't stay in this area because a dangerous cat that's going to be coming through soon. I told her I'm sure my friends will pick me up before that cat can get here. This camping thing isn't so bad when you have a warm fire and a warm tent and warm food. I don't remember having it before dear woman, but I even have a warm knitted blanket now. Ugh, I bet Becca is just laughing at me now with everyone. Becca is such a bitch. Joke's on her, I guess. Because of dear woman, I'm actually kinda having a nice time. I'm beginning to appreciate the quiet time out here in the woods. Like I'm becoming one with nature itself. Also, I feel bad for writing so many swears in my diary yesterday, but I feel like scribbling them out would only betray the genuine emotions I had at that point in time. 8.08. 1991, there is a thick fog all around me. I'm so glad that I got carried away while getting wood for the fire because I don't want to go far from the safety of my camp right now. There has been a sinister chittering coming from the fog, and I don't like it at all. For a minute, I thought that I heard the rumbling of Andrew's ancient Ford groaning its way through the forest. No one came out of the fog, so I decided to just stay in my tent. I even heard the thumping of dear woman's hooves coming close to the tent, but something about it felt wrong. Instead of the comforting glow I felt from her before, I now felt a cold dread. I might have believed it was dear woman if she hadn't already told me she was heading as far from here as she could. I'm glad I didn't leave the tent and just hid under my blanket. Earlier, when the weather began to clear, I could have sworn I saw a slender silhouette in the distance. It was sliding its way between trees and heading away from me, so I couldn't get a good look, even though the fog was getting lighter. I didn't think they would get me today. Becca and the others are probably going to make this stretch out until Sunday when I'm expected at home. I wish they would come back sooner, but I doubt it at this point. I have enough wood until tomorrow and the fog has mostly cleared up. Not sure what to do for the next few hours of daylight. September 8th, 1991, last night I met the chittering creatures. They sort of look like badgers, but all black and walking on their hind legs. Maybe a little more shorter than a badger would be on its hind legs, but I think that's the best description. They were just rummaging around my camp late last night with a couple of them just enjoying the warmth of the fire. When they noticed me watching, they were skittish until I offered them the last of the jerky. These little things loved the jerky. I think they were still hungry, and unfortunately they were just as confused as I am when presented with a can of beans and no can opener. I think I'll name them chitters after the noise they make. The chitters have a lot of personality, and each one seems to have their own unique quirks. My favorite one being a chitter I've named Munch, because he has a habit of sneaking behind the others to playfully bite their butts before running off immediately. I couldn't stay awake after a WHI. Lou, and seeing the creatures beginning to settle in front of the fire, I decided it was time to go to bed. When I woke up this morning, my new friends had left, but they had left cute stick sculptures strung up around my camp. I think it's pretty, and maybe a thank you from my friends for giving them a nice place to rest and a little snack. They've collected so much firewood as well, so I'm not going to have to worry for the next few days. I'm so lucky to have made such kind friends, even if only briefly. It's evening now, and I think I've finally managed to stab into a can of beef stew. But it's hard to eat with all the noise coming from down the hill. I think it's those foxes again. But I might be wrong, because I swear to God for just a second I saw the face of an old woman deep in the forest earlier. Fuck Becca, but I'm too tired to hate her right now. This has been a lot. 10. 8.1991 She's dead. Dear woman is dead. Her head was left just outside the edge of the camp this morning. She was so nice. I can't even believe something would do this to her. Last night I saw something. It must have been when her head was left, but it was too dark to see the head there. It was lit up by the faint light of my fire. I saw a large cat. His fur was jet black and moved with an otherworldly glide. The worst part is I thought its face was familiar. I don't know how, but I think it was the face of the old woman I saw the other day. This is getting fucked up, but something is telling me to stay put. There is this instinct to not leave the comfort of this nest I've made for myself, so I think for now I won't. I'm going to dig a grave for dear woman's head. It'll be a lot of digging considering her antlers, but she's worth the effort. I have enough wood. I have enough food, and I'm sure they will come back to me tomorrow. If not, then I'm sure I will see my mom soon enough, because when I don't turn up tomorrow, she is going to be here in a flash. 11. 8.1991 The fire is still going, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to abandon it soon. I can hear Andrew's old Ford and Becca's voice out in the distance. I think they've forgotten where they left me, but I'm sure if I just head down the hill where they are, I can lead them back to pick all the stuff up, and I can get out of here. The fog is really thick again, but I have to at least try. My food supply won't last much longer, and I just want to be home. The basement sack boy. It started the night I moved into my grandmother's old house. She had passed away the year prior, leaving the place to me. A creaking, decaying relic from the 1940s with a smell of mildew that seemed to seep from the walls. It wasn't exactly my dream home, but I was fresh out of college and broke, so I decided to make it work. The basement was the worst part. Damp, dark, and filled with years of my grandmother's hoarded treasures and trash. One evening, as I was sorting through the piles of junk, I found a Sackboy doll. You know Sackboy, right? From Little Big Planet? The doll was a perfect replica, except not quite. Its button eyes weren't uniform. One was red and the other green, giving it a lopsided, almost malevolent appearance. Its stitched smile was crooked, curling higher on one side, making it look more like a sneer than a grin. Something about it unsettled me, but I chalked it up to the overall creepy vibe of the basement. I tossed the doll into a box with some other old toys, figuring I'd deal with it later. That night, I heard footsteps creaking across the hardwood floor. At first, I thought it was the house settling. It was old, after all. But these footsteps were deliberate, starting at one end of the hallway and stopping just outside my bedroom door. I froze, clutching my blanket. There were no further sounds. In the morning, I found nothing out of place, and I convinced myself I'd imagined it. That was until I went back to the basement to finish cleaning. The Sackboy doll wasn't in the box where I'd left it. I searched the entire basement, thinking maybe I'd accidentally thrown it somewhere else, but it was gone. That was when I noticed something odd. On the dusty floor, leading up the stairs, were small, shoe-like footprints. They were far too small to belong to any human. That night, I locked my bedroom door. The footsteps came again, louder this time. They stopped at my door, and then the handle began to rattle. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found the Sackboy doll sitting on the kitchen counter. It was holding one of my knives, its tiny hands wrapped tightly around the hilt. I stared at it, my heart pounding. Was someone playing a prank on me? Was I losing my mind? I grabbed the doll and threw it into the garbage outside, stuffing it deep under layers of trash. I wasn't taking any chances. That night, I heard the footsteps again, but this time they didn't stop at my door. I woke up to the sound of something scratching at my bed frame. I turned on the lamp, and there it was, the Sackboy doll sitting on my nightstand, its head tilted toward me. The knife was gone, but one of its button eyes was dangling by a thread, as if it had been through something. I didn't know what else to do. I grabbed the doll and drove it out to the woods, as far away from the house as I could manage. I buried it in a shallow grave under a tree and left without looking back. For the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully, until the smell woke me. A rancid, putrid stench filled the room, like rotting flesh and stagnant water. I gagged, stumbling out of bed to turn on the light. The Sackboy doll was there, sitting on the floor by the door. Its stitching was undone in places, and I could see something black and oozing inside it, like tar. The dangling button I was now gone entirely, leaving an empty hole that seemed to stare right at me. And then it moved, just a twitch, its head tilting ever so slightly, but it was enough to send me into a blind panic. I grabbed the doll and threw it into the fireplace, dousing it in lighter fluid before setting it alight. It screamed, not like a human scream, but a high-pitched, distorted wail, like metal grinding against metal. The flames flickered and roared, and the doll's silhouette writhed in the fire until it was nothing but ash. I thought it was over, but then I heard the footsteps again. They came from the basement this time, slow and deliberate, ascending the stairs. I locked myself in my room, trembling, as the footsteps stopped outside my door. The rattling of the handle was more violent now, as if whatever was out there was angry. I don't know how long I stayed awake, but eventually, the sound stopped. In the morning, I found a single scrap of burlap on my pillow, stained with black tar. I sold the house the next week, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear the footsteps.
Thanks for listening to today's story. Let us know what you think. If you want to hear more scary stories, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode when we upload it. We'll always be here and welcome you.